You have to commit yourself fully to the idea and especially hang on to the passion and the brand as much as you can, because if you don't submerge yourself in all the aspects of the business or the idea or the industry, that will be a disadvantage to you in a big way, especially down the line if things get bigger.
I'm Amy Jo Martin. Welcome to the Why Not Now show. You know that thing you've been thinking about doing? Yeah, that one. Why not now? Have you ever actually taken the time to ask yourself, what's stopping me? Let's talk it through. This is your chance to give that idea the attention it deserves and take action. Each episode, I have a chat with a fascinating person, from entrepreneurs to athletes, celebrities, my parents, rocket scientists, and all walks of life. We talk through a critical time when they've asked themselves, why not now? We dissect that day or even that moment, step by step. Tony Hawk, quite possibly the most well-known and best professional skateboarder on the planet. He went pro when he was 14, and he started making more money than his teachers. He went on to experience a lot of success with skateboarding, and then the industry and the sport as a whole became a little less popular. So what many people don't realize is Tony Hawk went through a big drought unexpectedly and had to navigate that. The other big unexpected aspect of Tony is he's an entrepreneur. He has had his own company, Birdhouse, for many, many years. And he also has a licensed video game that's become $1 billion franchise. We talk about business. We talk about how Tony refers to having gone through 3 generations of haters in the real world, in the physical world, you name it. But the through line for all of this conversation is that Tony always comes back to skateboarding. That's his passion. That's the transcendent thread here, and it's what's allowed him to do really well in other areas. For someone who has seen and done a lot in his life, he still believes that ignorance was bliss when he was first getting started. We also touch on his foundation. It's really kind of known as best in class when it comes to the world of nonprofit and charities. And he's created and built these skate parks across the nation for kids, for adults to use and enjoy. The guy is pretty fascinating and truly sticks to what he loves, which is inspiring in itself. I want to take a quick moment to just thank you. Thank you for listening. This podcast has experienced a lot of growth recently, and it's because of you. I appreciate you tuning in. I appreciate your reviews. They do matter, and I do read every single one. So if you haven't had a chance yet and you're enjoying what you're hearing, please go ahead and give us a review or share the episode with a friend, someone that you think might enjoy it. We tackle the most taboo topics on the Why Not Now show. Oftentimes, you're hearing guests share things they've never shared before. In the spirit of things we don't typically talk about, you should know that the Why Not Now show is supported by Poopery, the original before you go toilet spray. It's magic. My friends at Poopery have literally taken the smell out of you-know-what. This pure blend of essential oils stops bathroom odor before it begins. Visit poopery.com, and Why Not Now listeners get 20% off with code WHYNOTNOW. That's all one word. And you can hear the story about Poopery in our interview with founder Susie Batiste. That's Why Not Now episode 28. Poopery is also available at Target. Tony Hawk, welcome to the show. I've been looking forward to this conversation. Are you ready?
Sure.
So can you tell me about a time when you had to ask yourself, why not now?
I think probably it was when I started my skateboard company, which was the first company I started. I was still making career as a pro skater, but I could see that my options were fading in terms of making a living at it. This is around 1991, and my career as a skater was uncertain because skating was kind of, well, my sponsors were drying up, my royalties were kind of slowing down, and I thought I always wanted to try to start a skate company, and I knew that it would take the least amount of capital at that time because skating was such a small industry that, in order to start a company and be established, it didn't take a whole lot of resources. So that was it. I thought, why not now? I'm only 24, but at the same time, I have the knowledge, I have the drive, and it wasn't. It was really risky, but at the same time, I couldn't imagine waiting any longer.
And that's what's so fascinating. So you're 24 and you're seeing this kind of drought in the industry and of the popularity of the sport, but you also had the vision from a business perspective and probably a passion to want to be around that, just that vibe that you started this when you were 24. And I think what's fascinating about your story, Tony, is that most people probably don't realize the big ups and downs that you've had. And this being one of you went pro when you were, 14? And then at
Right.
24 to be hitting some tough times as far as not having that success that you had for so long. How did you, starting the business obviously was one thing kind of tactically, but even emotionally and personally, how did you deal with that?
I think luckily I was naive enough to not realize the giant risk I was taking, especially with all the finances, because at that point in my life, I had 2 mortgages, I had a son on the way, and like I said, my prospects were sort of slowing down very much. So I took a second mortgage out on my bigger house. So basically put all the money that I had saved into this company, and then moved into the smaller place, sold the bigger place for basically what I owed, and sort of regrouped and cut a lot of expenses personally. But it still allowed me to keep skating. I guess that was the thread, and that was really the motivation, was that I was able to remain in the skate industry and follow my passion. Even though it wasn't as lucrative as it once was, it still allowed me to do that for the most part for a living. And so even though I had to compromise on my expenses and my lifestyle for the most part, that wasn't really an issue as long as I got to skate.
And that's what I love about learning more about you, is that passion has been the thread for everything. And I think intuitively it makes sense and how good and how successful you've been with it, but it's because you love it so much. Would you say that's just the core?
Yeah, that's it for sure. And as things progressed and eventually got bigger than I ever dreamed they could, then the funny thing is it just allowed me to skate more and more in the style that I always hoped I could. So it allowed me to chase other opportunities and take more risks in terms of businesses and events that I wouldn't have been able to at the time when we were just kind of struggling along with Birdhouse and in the beginning stages. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And I feel like I in a lot of ways was blissfully ignorant of how big the risks were at the time. But then that set me up for being willing to take those risks on a bigger scale, in terms of doing a big arena tour and spending $1 million on a ramp system. That's something I never imagined that I would be capable of or have the opportunity to do. And when the time came, I didn't hesitate.
We talk about that a bit on the show as far as the concept of graduating from your levels of degrees of why not now ideas. And it sounds like that definitely was part of the case with your path. And also when you started your company at such a young age, and now you've gone on, for the listeners that may not realize, Tony Hawk is just as much a businessman as you are a skater, as far as just what you've been you've had your hands in and what you've built and done, and also from a foundation side and giving back. It's incredible. You've done so many different things. Can you talk a little bit about staying true to what you're good at? Because I've heard you talk in some cases about getting out of your swim lane, but doing what you're uniquely qualified to do and how important that was.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I obviously I was following my passion and definitely playing to my strengths in terms of being creative and in terms of being determined or stubborn, as it were. I learned all that from skating. So I took those same ideals to my business practices. And for sure, there were other times where I just saw, it wasn't that I saw voids in the marketplace. I just saw opportunity where we could take the skate lifestyle and the brand and the aesthetics into different industries and into different businesses, because there were some obvious fits and synergy to what we were doing into, say, streetwear. And a lot of that just came from intuition, but a lot of it came because I wanted to share the sort of DIY attitude of skateboarding in a much bigger way. And I found other ways to do that, and ones that I hadn't even imagined, through video games, through clothing, through content, through tours and things like that. And in a big way through endorsements. What I was able to do was take a lot of the bigger endorsements that I got down the line, which included brands like Frito-Lay and McDonald's and Powerade and Apple, and I was able to use their marketing dollars to raise awareness for skateboarding, to market skateboarding in a sense.
And such a visionary and an anchor, obviously, for the sport. And what's back to your why not now, when you started Birdhouse and you were a skater and you hadn't had much business experience, it sounds like. However, most people and a lot of listeners, they're getting ready to start their own thing, make a big shift in their career, whatever it may be, maybe launch a company or change a side hustle into a main gig. And it seems that you didn't overthink this to the extent to where you talked yourself out of it out of lack of experience with business. Can you walk through a little bit of what you even remember of that specific time of just pressing the go button? Were you just confident that you knew you could make it happen because of your skating kind of record?
I would say I was mildly confident. I knew that at the very least I was going to put together a really good team of skaters, and I was going to be able to give them opportunities just through my connections and through my prior success that maybe they wouldn't have had otherwise. And so I was excited about that aspect of being more of a mentor to them. In terms of building a brand that was going to sustain itself, we were on shaky ground for the first 3 or 4 years. So I wasn't certain or that confident that it was going to take off gangbusters. But I knew that if we were able to stay afloat, I was happy. And that was pretty much it. I mean, yes, absolutely, I would love to have the success, and I wasn't trying to sell ourselves short. But I didn't see the growth in skating as coming as quickly as we had hoped. But also, I was very lucky in that I had a partner at Birdhouse who had a business degree and at least understood payroll and budgeting and marketing in a way that I was just naive to.
And that's awesome. I appreciate your honesty, too, of kind of the approach that you had when you went into it. So you mentioned intuition. Can you share with me how you know when to make things happen versus let them happen?
I think it's just more of either seeing an opportunity that I think would work well and would be a good fit with skating or with one of our brands, or if something comes along and I figure out a way to fine-tune it so that we keep the integrity of our brand, we keep the integrity of skateboarding, but also we are able to partner up with maybe a bigger company and use their resources. When you say why not now, I think there's a lot of that in my eyes that I've done where it's not why not now, it's like it's more it has to be now. There's a big dream that I had of, like I mentioned, this tour, the Boom Boom Hakshiam tour that we started in 2002. And that was my way of doing our sports as entertainment. And it was a direct response to me having finished my competitive career in 1999 and wanting to go out and still perform, but not compete. And I felt like our sports had come of age where they could be the headliner of a tour instead of just being the sideshow to a football game or the concert tour. A lot of like back then it would be the Warped Tour and the punk bands are playing on the big stage, and then there'd be people skating out in the parking lot, and that was sort of the sideshow to this bigger event. I felt like we had come so far, especially at that moment in time in 2001, 2002, that we could headline a tour. And so my attitude was like, this is the time. It has to happen now. It wasn't like, why not now? It's like, let's do it now or we're going to miss this window.
Ooh, I like that flip on it for sure. There's a level of urgency when you have that window and you recognize it.
Was, and we actually delayed the tour by almost a year because I didn't understand the logistics of doing an arena tour. And I was dreading that delay.
Wow, I imagine, because you knew that window.
It's going to be a year later than I thought. It's not, we're not going to work, or it's not that hype has passed, but it did not, obviously.
Well, and you've always been innovative, Tony, even looking back at when Twitter really came on the scene. So you may not know this, but I used to work in the NBA, and I then started my own company and helped Shaquille O'Neal with his Twitter presence and doing stunts and random acts of Shaqness stuff. And right around the same time, you were out there doing treasure hunts and using social media in a very innovative way. So there is that edge to you where I just see you pushing, you're a pioneer. When that was happening and you were realizing that these communication channels could be used in such a creative way, was it your idea to start doing those stunts where you'd actually bridge the virtual world with the physical world, or was it your team, or what was going on behind the scenes?
I had no team. I was learning that all on my own.
Really?
Sure. In fact, a lot of my team, in terms of the people I work closely with, were just kind of confused because it seemed like this weird novelty to them.
Yep.
And it, a lot of ways, it seemed like that to me too. I wasn't thinking of it as some sort of big future or some way to promote or even monetize my presence. I just was having fun with it, and it took off. I mean, that was really the baseline of it, is that I saw how prolific Twitter had become, especially, and how information was traveling faster on Twitter than it was in the news cycle. And so I thought, well, what happens if I were to just sort of stash something? I literally had a skateboard in my car, and I was on my way to my office, and I just stashed it behind a fire hydrant in a cul-de-sac sort of down the road from my office. And by the time I got to my office, and I tweeted where it was.
Did you sign it, autograph it?
I think I did.
Probably. Okay, good.
By the time I got to my office, there was already someone claiming that they found it with a photo of them holding it, and other people were arriving at the same time. And I thought, wow, it was like a frenzy all in a matter of 10 minutes. That's what gave me the idea. I mean, that's what was the seed for doing it on a bigger scale.
There's a theme here that you follow what you have fun doing and enjoy doing and are passionate about. And it's so simple, yet so many of us, I think, get shiny object syndrome with things that maybe might be the next big thing or financial potential gains, and that's so normal. But I really appreciate your consistency because it's clearly done very well for you. I mean, I didn't realize this until I was
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's probably one of the biggest takeaways that I've had in learning more about your journey in all these verticals. Your video game company generated more than $1.4 billion in sales. Is that correct?
Well, okay, that wasn't my company. That was a license, but
okay.
Yeah, it was definitely a big part of it. The video game company, the publisher is Activision. The developer was Neversoft, and I worked closely with Neversoft for almost 3 years before the first game was released, and that was more.
But it was your game. It was your name, right?
It was, yeah, absolutely, and honestly, just the idea that I got offered to work on a video game was a huge opportunity and super exciting for me because I played video games my whole life, starting with Missile Command and Pac-Man and going to the arcade and through the years, all of home systems. So to be able to work on a game that was focused on skateboarding was incredibly exciting. And I demanded, it came with a lot of pushback. I demanded to have full approval over anything that it incorporated in terms of my name or likeness or graphics or anything. And I had to fight for that because they're like, well, you're lucky to even be involved with this thing. And, we're paying you good money. And I said, but still, I want to keep the integrity of not just skateboarding, but also my brand. And I fought for those controls, but at the same time, I proved myself in that I was available every step of the way in every aspect of the game to direct that and to make it authentic. It wasn't like I was making it about me. It was more like I want this to represent skateboarding well, because if people enjoy this game, they're going to want to pick up a skateboard. That was the pie in the sky idea for me. I really didn't know if that was going to happen. I thought that if nothing else, the game would be released and skaters would like it and they would be inspired to buy a PlayStation. And that was it. For me, that was validation.
And that's amazing that it started because you loved playing video games when you were younger too, and becoming such an evangelist for this entire culture and sport, selflessly, from what it really seems. For people who are listening to you right now and hearing this thread of, if you follow what you have fun at or you have fun doing and enjoy, you're passionate about, things are probably going to work out pretty well. But for those people who are maybe having some of that shiny object syndrome of other things that might seem like the route to go and not truly following what they're passionate about, what would you say if they're on the edge of maybe making a decision?
I think you have to commit yourself fully to the idea and especially hang on to the passion and the brand as much as you can, because if you don't submerge yourself in all the aspects of the business or the idea or the industry, that will be a disadvantage to you in a big way, especially down the line if things get bigger. And if you end up selling your brand or going for that first chance of sort of exit money, no matter what they say to you and how they say that they're going to keep your vision alive and you're going to keep the brand going the way it was, it will never happen like that. It will always turn into something else, and usually something that you're not excited about or proud of. And it may still carry your name. And so I think you've got to, the easy money sometimes seems fantastical, but you've got to try to keep control of your brand as much as you can.
Great advice. And so you just turned 50. How was that for you? Was it a big deal, not a big deal?
I didn't think it was such a big deal. I wasn't considering how impactful that might be, but I think it was more my friends and family and ultimately other people and fans that made such a huge deal about it that I sort of had to embrace that and maybe at least acknowledge it in my own way. But I don't feel any different. It's definitely a milestone. I've never made any ultimatums that said, if I reach this age, I can't do this or I'll stop doing this. So I've definitely slowed down just in terms of trying to taking risks physically. Obviously, there's things you just can't do as you age. But I also have learned to sort of refine my skating style so that I can still be creative, but not risking my life all the time.
Which is awesome. And you're still skating every day. Is that what you said? Pretty much.
Almost, yeah. If I'm not actively skating for myself, then I'm out with my kids because all of our kids skate, and so they really enjoy that. When we travel, one of the priorities is finding skating spots.
Do you ever just roll up to your own skate parks that you've created with your foundation and pop in and surprise people?
Every once in a while, especially if I'm traveling, if I'm in the new city and there's a park there, then I'll just show up to it and hang with the locals.
Oh man,
I did that recently. My wife and I were in Ireland for our anniversary, and I rolled up to a skate park in Belfast in Northern Ireland, and she filmed me as I was going in because she just thought it would be so. She thought it would be interesting to see the reactions. We've never really documented that, and it's out there online. It's pretty funny because there's this sort of slow burn of people realizing that I had rolled up and I'm just skating through the park, and they all start chasing me.
That's awesome. And so if we just go onto YouTube and Belfast Tony Hawk or something, we'll Google and we'll find it.
So yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. I can only imagine people just shocked, and that's so fun to capture it on video.
Yeah, well, the other thing was there was no inkling that we were even in Northern Ireland. It was we got invited to the set of Game of Thrones on a whim and went there literally the next day. And so it was more like it wouldn't be such a surprise if somehow people knew you were around or maybe in the general area, but there was no sign that we were even close to there.
How funny. They must have been shocked. And inquiring minds want to know, how was the set of Game of Thrones?
It was cool. It was kind of wrapping up.
Oh, okay.
So the big dream was to be able to sit on the throne, and that was gone.
Oh, man.
Yeah, but I definitely saw some spoilers, so I'm leaving this out.
Oh, I bet you are signed a secret or sworn to secrecy.
You have no idea of the paperwork that we had to sign.
I can only imagine. Yeah, we won't go there.
No, we had to give them our phones, and yeah, it was. They keep it. Hey, it's probably the most closely guarded secret of television right now.
We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Hi, everyone. If you are digging this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. It just takes a moment, and it means a ton to us. Also, after recording more than 100 episodes, I've created a bit of a cheat sheet on the top 5 things I've learned from renegades and how they get from idea to action, from dreaming to doing. I will email you the downloadable PDF when you subscribe to my newsletter. Just head to amyjomartin.com and click on Connect with Me. So let's talk about mentorship a little bit. You've been such a pioneer in this world, and did you have a mentor as you were navigating as a young, 14-year-old, and obviously you had your family. Did you have a presence outside of your family that guided you?
My original, I hate to say coach, but more team manager, it was Stacy Peralta when I was on the Bones Brigade team, which I was 10 years of my life. He was my best compass in terms of how to be a pro skater, but also how to be responsible and also how to be approachable. And I didn't understand any of that stuff. When I started skating, even when I turned pro, there was no standard for pro skating. There was no one really making a living at it anyway. So we had to sort of make it up as we went along. And Stacy was the closest thing to ever having that sort of success. And so he gave us a lot of good advice, but mostly just led by example. And I learned a lot just being with him, and that being a pro skater doesn't mean you're just good at skating. It's a job, and you've got to rise to the occasion.
And are you now mentoring people? You mentioned that you kind of did along the way earlier on, but do you still maintain as a mentor to people?
Yeah, I definitely, with my own Birdhouse team, we have a great and really eclectic group of riders, and I try to help them as much as I can. I've given them a lot of different opportunities that they wouldn't have found or had available to them. But also a lot of people in terms of there's a lot of local skaters that there's a pool of talent in San Diego because a lot of people end up moving here if they have any chance of success. Because the skate industry was, a lot of it was founded here, and there are a lot of facilities. So a lot of those kids will see me at the places and ask for advice.
I like what you said too about Stacy, your mentor, leading by example, and that was a large way that you got value from him, and it's interesting. I get a lot of questions about mentorship and people asking, how can I find a great mentor? And it's always been so organic for me as finding mentors and mentees. It's just usually you're in a similar proximity and interests, and in this case, I mean, same with you. I think there's this thought that because of social media, we can just kind of connect with people on LinkedIn, but to have a true valuable mentorship, in my experience, it's been a very in-person, personal thing.
Yeah, that's it. And I think that I think my best example of that is Andrew Reynolds was one of our first team riders on Birdhouse. And he has gone on to create a hugely successful skate brand, which he did the exact same thing I did. He got to a certain point in his career and decided that he's going to take it out on his own. And who am I to complain when that's exactly what I did? He left our brand and started his own brand. And he tells people all the time that I learned all this from Tony. I learned how to, how to be a skate team manager, how to run a brand with integrity. And I'm really honored with that. And I guess that would be my legacy in terms of being a skate company owner.
Absolutely. That's living legacy for sure. And so from a performance standpoint, you've obviously performed most all of your life, and you've taken it to, business and keynote stages now and all types of different performance outside of skating. What is something that you do to keep your nerves in check?
It's a good question. I think, practice. I mean, definitely with skating, what I learned and how I learned to overcome being nervous was just to practice to the point where my routines and my tricks became sort of mundane. And so that even when there is a little added anxiety, I was able to perform them. But in terms of public speaking, I kind of got thrown into that by accident. I would end up in big events and forums and things like that when I was having success as a skater. So I did learn how to at least be comfortable in front of an audience and speaking. But I got invited to do a couple of sort of fireside chats at different conferences. Mm-hmm. And that's when I sort of found my voice and found a way to tell my story and eventually learned to tell it on my own.
Oh, cool. So you kind of went from a dialogue to a monologue?
Yes. Yeah. Because I found myself sort of going to the same anecdotes when I was getting asked questions. And not that to say that my speech is formulated at all, because a lot of times I'm off the cuff, but it did give me a sense of pace and a sense of cadence and history of how I would tell my story.
Absolutely. And what resonates too, because you're able to see the response, and very interesting. And it's cool to see you out there doing more. I saw your Chase keynote, or one of them. I'm not sure how many you've done. And for you to be able to give the business insight, and real world application to anyone is a neat thing to be able to do, given what you've done is so specific and special, but the things that you've learned are applicable everywhere. And what is one lesson that you've had to learn more than once or over and over?
Oh, wow. The lesson that keeps on giving is parenting. I mean, that is always challenging, and I have kids ranging from 25 to 10, and the sort of challenges you meet with an adult child are so different, but at the same time just as important. And so I've had to really, in a lot of ways, I feel bad for my older kids because I've figured this out and I've gotten a lot better at it as I've gotten older. And so they didn't get my sort of best parenting skills and advice when they were young.
I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that, for sure. And you've been an early adopter of social media. How do you deal with that with having a 10-year-old daughter? Or is it even a thing yet? And then knowing you have other children too, different ages older, how has that played? What dynamic does that take on?
Well, for sure with the younger ones, trying to monitor it as best I can, and just keeping them away from any sort of sketchy scenarios or creeps or whatever. That's the priority. Absolutely. The rest of it, in terms of sort of bullying and the negative aspects, the only way I can really govern that is just if I lead by example and not be affected by it. And luckily, I've had sort of 3 generations of haters, so to speak, through my life. When I first started skating, my style was so weird and I was so little that I got made fun of a lot, especially even in the magazines and by the older skaters. And so I was this outcast in an already outcast activity. So that was sort of my first lesson of believing in myself. Mm. And then when I started getting some success in the late 90s with the video game, with sponsorships, then I was called a sellout. And then it was like I had no integrity and I was exploiting skateboarding. And I didn't listen to that because I knew I was using these marketing dollars to promote skating. So that was sort of my second wave of haters, so to speak. And then when social media came along, the floodgates were open and all the negativity was out there. And it was like, please, I'm already so jaded by what, the things people are saying to me online are things people used to say to my face. So you're not affecting me at all behind your anonymous Twitter account. And so I think that through not being affected by that and just laughing it off, I hope that my kids are taking cues from that.
Mm-hmm. That's a great front row seat of how to deal and manage it. The 3 generations of haters. That's so interesting.
Yeah,
I mean, and I can see, it's very similar to Laird Hamilton has been on the show, and when he started to innovate kind of his sport in different ways and bringing in different equipment, he definitely experienced a lot of pushback, but also when he was younger. And it's interesting. There's some parallels there for sure. Well, a couple of rapid fire questions for you. All-time favorite book?
That's tricky. The one book that resonated with me was High Fidelity.
High Fidelity.
Nick Hornby.
And what keeps you up at night?
Oh, that my kids are safe.
Pirate.
And sometimes that literally keeps me up at night because they stay up too late.
Pirates or ninjas, Tony? Who's tougher and why?
Pirates or ninjas? I feel like ninjas are much stealthier, so I'm going to go with them.
Okay, I like your rationale. When you find yourself in an oh shit moment, what do you do?
I choose I choose the safer option.
The safer option?
Yeah.
Path of least resistance.
Or the more efficient option.
And can you think of a moment recently where you've been like, oh shit, how am I going to get out of this one?
Yeah, today actually. My daughter is here at home. My wife had to do some stuff today, and generally my daughter was going to maybe come with me to my office because she enjoys going there and seeing the people there and sliding down the ramps and stuff like that. But because of the bee sting, she couldn't go anywhere, and then my wife was kind of stuck here with her. So I had to reschedule our meeting this morning for earlier so that I could actually get home to do this with you.
Oh.
This morning was the oh shit moment, like, oh no, Katie can't go anywhere. I've got to change my day.
Totally juggle and rearrange Tetris stuff. Well, thank you for making it to our interview. I mean, we're grateful for that.
I was always going to make that. It just depended on where I was going to be.
Well, thank you. And final question, what advice would you give to your younger self, Tony?
Don't try to do a loop in a gorilla outfit for MTV.
That's a good one. That's
because you're going to end up breaking your pelvis, which I did.
Which is Jackass, right? Was that Jackass?
It was Wild Boys, but the same crew.
Oh my gosh, that's a good one. That's good advice. Solid.
I still wish I could go back in time and tell myself that.
Oh my gosh, what a outcome for something. And you've done so many other much probably more difficult things, but the gorilla outfit, it doesn't really help, does it?
Yeah, that was a bad day.
Well, thank you so much, Tony. This has been awesome, and you truly are such an innovator. It's cool that you're sharing so much too these days with what you've learned, because people can benefit a lot from it. And I appreciate your time.
Well, thank you very much.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the show. Hit me up on social media to let me know what you think. I'm at Amy Jo Martin on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And I want to hear your Why Not Now moments so I can share them on the show. Just send me a note to whynotnow@amyjomartin.com. For show notes and other offers, you can visit amyjomartin.com/whynotnow. And while you're there, don't forget to sign up for my email newsletter for exclusive content and announcements. A big thanks to Rock Salt Music for all of the tunes by the talented John Coggins. And of course, a hat tip to Richard Brewer for editing and producing the show. I'll see you next time. And until then, why not now?